It's in American interest to not see any Russians die in terrorist attack, as it is in Russian interest to prevent any terrorist attacks in the United States or elsewhere in the world. So I don't think there's any dispute on that in Congress, and I think maybe some of the posturing is, frankly, political as opposed to substantive.
Tens of billions, hundreds of billions, probably $1 trillion of U.S. government subsidization of the energy industry. The U.S. government could subsidize mining of Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies and put those into wallets called American citizens could each have an automatic wallet tied to their Social Security account, and they could get a daily, weekly, or monthly airdrop of crypto coins that they can then use to boost the economy with. The government can easily do that.
Russia mourns the 71 people who died in Sunday's plane crash near Moscow. The passenger airliner came down just minutes after takeoff, leaving no survivors. The U.S. admits parts of the forces it trained in Syria are fleeing to join a conflict against Washington's ally, Turkey. And Russian athletes secure their second medal at the Winter Olympics in South Korea, taking silver in team figure skating. But some athletes have criticized the Russians' medal-winning performance. Around the clock across the world, this is RT International. From the team and myself, Ewan O'Neill, welcome to the programme. Russia is mourning the 71 people killed in a plane crash on Sunday. The regional passenger jet went down minutes after taking off from Moscow's Domodedovo airport. There were no survivors. It's now been over 24 hours since the crash, and we're learning more about the passengers on board the ill-fated plane. This was the harrowing reaction of one grieving mother who lost her only son in the tragedy.
Список, фамилия. Каждый наш, когда летел у вас. Когда за гробом ехать, надо будет кого-то еще просить.
This woman and her daughter were also on board. Nadia, the youngest victim, was just 5 years old. Ilya Stavsky also caught the flight. It was his 33rd birthday. He was on his way home to celebrate with family. Here's how some of those affected are coming to terms with the tragedy.
Очень жалко, когда хорошие люди уходят. Особенно молодые, они только начали жить.
Скорбим. Очень хорошие девочки были, бортпроводницы. Веселые, позитивные, добрые. Светлая память.
Я хочу съездить в Саратов на похороны. В последний раз. 3 месяца его не было дома. На вахте был. Но, к сожалению, так мы его и не увидели больше.
The flight's final seconds were captured by a security camera thought to be installed on a nearby house. The crash is visible at the top of the picture, followed by a powerful explosion. You can also see black smoke rising. Investigators have confirmed that the plane exploded on impact and not in the air. Well, a large-scale recovery operation was launched on Sunday in the aftermath, involving hundreds of emergency service workers and vehicles. But it has been extremely difficult to locate debris due to the weather conditions. Murat Gazdiev is on the ground for us at the site of the wreckage.
The search and recovery operation is continuing. It is even nearing its conclusion. According to the latest statement we've heard from the emergency services, they've searched 25 of the 30 square hectares where the plane and its debris believed to have been thrown about over. But as you see, one of the biggest problems here is the weather, the snow. It's getting colder and colder, and they've had to bring in a lot of specialized equipment, especially stuff to melt the snow, heat cannons, as they call them here in Russia. There are also hundreds and hundreds of rescuers here. They're working in shifts so that some can rest while others sift through the snow and the wreckage and debris. But both black boxes have now been found, and the investigators should have everything they need to rebuild point by point that takeoff, the short flight, and to find out whatever it was exactly that caused this fatal tragedy.
To more global news this hour. Washington has admitted that some of the Kurdish forces it trains in Syria are shifting to fight against one of America's own allies, Turkey. Ankara is currently on the offensive in northern Syria against groups it deems are terrorists. RT's Caleb Maupin has more now on the tensions currently playing out in Syria.
U.S. Secretary of Defense James Mattis has confirmed that U.S. armed Kurdish forces in the SDF have been relocating to the northern parts of Syria to protect territory from Turkey.
The distraction of what is going on up in Afrin right now, which is drawing off some of the Syrian Democratic Forces. They see their fellow Kurds in Afrin under attack, so that is causing at least their attention to shift up there.
Now, the Kurds and Turkey are both key U.S. allies in the region. However, there's been tension between all three of them in recent months. Now, we've heard of how the USA has been arming the Kurdish forces and providing them with weapons. Now, Ankara has been quite upset by this action. They consider this to be the arming of terrorists. Now, at this point, we do have a statement from James Mattis confirming that he believes there are legitimate security concerns on Turkey's part about these Kurdish forces that have been armed by the United States.
We continue to work with Turkey on the areas of disagreements, which is how do we take down ISIL as rapidly as possible. They have a legitimate security concern, and we do not dismiss one bit of that.
Now, there has been escalating tension between the United States and Turkey, especially in the aftermath of an announcement from the United States that states that it intended to create a 30,000-strong border force to protect Syria's border with Turkey. Now, U.S. leaders backtracked from those comments, but that hasn't stopped Turkey from being quite upset by these remarks. Now, we've recently seen the beginning of Operation Olive Branch, and this is Turkish forces moving into Syria to fight against the Kurds, two allies of the United States clashing with each other in Syria. As the tensions escalate, we're even hearing calls to rename the street on which the U.S. embassy in Turkey's capital is located. There are calls to rename the street Olive Branch after Operation Olive Branch. The Turkish operation to go into Syria and fight against the Kurdish forces armed by the United States. There seems to be quite a bit of contradiction in the words and statements of U.S. leaders, and there seems to be rising tension between all three parties, the USA, Turkey, and the Kurdish forces.
The rift between Turkey and the US could deepen further over another region in northern Syria, Manbij, where Turkey is targeting in the next part of its military operation. Currently, US troops are stationed there, opening up the possibility of direct confrontation. We asked Ahmed Al-Barai, a Middle East expert, where this could lead.
Now, the big elephant in the room is Manbij, and that's where the United States is still on the ground. They do have troops, and in that case, if they do not withdraw their troops and troops and advisors from this region, then Ankara says, and repeatedly the president here threatens that he's going to go ahead with this operation in Manbij. In case this happens, I think there will be a kind of military standoff, and that could lead to more tension, if not a military standoff between the United States and Ankara. That could lead to a major escalation, to more wars on the ground. That will lead to a more alienating and more isolating of the United States.
Well, it seems Ankara isn't looking to ease tensions with Washington for the time being. The Turkish government have even renamed the street where the U.S. embassy is located in the capital. It will now be called Olive Branch, named after Ankara's military operation, which has seen U.S.-trained Kurds moving across the region to fight against Turkey. The foreign minister of the Netherlands has admitted that he lied about hearing Vladimir Putin talking up ambitions to reform the Soviet Union. The claims were made about the Russian president back in 2016. Speaking to me earlier on the details, Samira Khan.
When the Dutch foreign minister was campaigning 2 years ago, he said that he overheard President Putin outlining his plan to unify Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, the Baltic States, and Kazakhstan as a single country. And this was back in 2006 at some sort of a business gathering. But this has also been a general talking point when it comes to Russia, that Putin is supposedly trying to bring back the Soviet Union. However, the foreign minister was working for Shell at the time, but his story was questioned when it was discovered that despite being part of the Shell delegation, he wasn't at the 2006 meeting. And not only that, he wasn't even in Russia at the time. When he was confronted about this, he said he was lying to protect a source, but then he also said that he regretted lying. Obviously, this isn't the first instance of fake news regarding Russia. There have been rumors floating around that Russia influenced the Brexit vote, and then there's also been President Macron's various attacks against Russia. During Macron's campaign, he claimed that Russia did influence the election. However, this was later debunked by a French cybersecurity chief who said that there was no evidence of Russian meddling. Now, in Britain, the British government is still looking for evidence of Russian interference. However, YouTube just a few days ago has gone on record saying that there's been no sort of Russian interference. So it seems that in looking for news about Russia, they're actually just creating fake news about Russia.
American tycoon George Soros is pledging £500,000 to an anti-Brexit campaign group. And despite Soros being accused of meddling in British politics, the billionaire